You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
I'm Chris Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, for 16 years and over 21 episodes, we bring you the Chris Voss Show. Going on our 17th year, and we bring you the most smartest minds. As always, we're going on, almost 2 decades? We've been doing this for a long damn time, so we're just going to do it for another 20 years, and then we'll quit. Anyway, guys, we have an amazing young man on the show today. We're going to be talking about his insights and brilliance and how it can be translated into your life and make you smarter and probably do better business, build better brands, et cetera, et cetera. We have Jean-Pierre LaCroix on the show with us today. His newest book came out April 17, 2018. It's called Desire by Design, What Data-Driven Marketers Should Know About Driving Desire for Their Brands. And you can pick up his book. We're going to be talking about how brands work, some of the things they do to help give customers what they want, something that a lot of people need, or if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, it's going to be great data for you. With over 3 decades of experience in the branding and design interest, let me hit that. With over 3 decades of experience in the branding and design industry, JP LaCroix is the president, chief strategy officer, and founder of SLD. The international design firm specializes in creating immersive brand experiences that connect in the blink of an eye. As a visionary leader, he has helped Fortune 500 companies transform their brands and organizations through his unique Think Blink process, which combines strategic foresight, design innovation, and consumer experience engineering. He's also an accomplished speaker, author, and educator who has shared his insights and expertise on global stages, best-selling books, and prestigious institutions. His mission is to evaluate the role and value of design in business and society and inspire others to achieve design excellence. Welcome to the show, JP. How are you?
Fantastic, Chris. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to having this great conversation.
Thanks for coming. We really appreciate it. Give us your .coms. Where do you want people to get to know you better on the interwebs?
Simple. It's www.sld.com. That's S like love, Sam, L like love, D like dog.com.
So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside your book, Desire by Design?
A lot of marketers spend enormous amount of time exploring features for their products. This does better, it cleans faster, it's brighter, it does this, it does that. And the reality is that consumers don't buy products that way. The reality is consumers buy emotionally these products. They buy them by how those products make them feel, how they reflect their self-image. And marketers spend so much time focusing on features when they should be focusing on how those brands emotionally connect, and what are those emotions that they need to pull to drive that brand loyalty for the consumer.
And it's something. How did you get into this business where you're studying brands, advising brands, and all that good stuff? Tell us.
Well, I started as
what inspired you.
Yeah, I started as a designer, close to 40 years ago, and then I slowly evolved to play a bigger role in strategy, because what we're discovering is, design can be very subjective, but if you tie it to business metrics, if you tie it to solving business problems, it becomes significantly less subjective. And then I started my firm 35 years ago, SLD, and now we do work globally. We have an office in Shanghai. We do considerable amount of assignments in the US, Canada, Europe. But 33 years ago, we were doing consulting work for Pizza Hut US. We were actually launching a new concept called Pizza Hut Cafe, and we were doing focus groups. Focus groups are, you invite 8 or 9 consumers, and you present ideas and have discussions. And during those discussions, consumers were calling Pizza Hut Red Roof. I said, well, that's interesting. You're calling them Red Roof. Why aren't you calling it Pizza Hut or Pizza Hut Cafe? They said, because when I'm driving down the road and I'm looking for Pizza Hut, I'm looking for the red roof. And that really caught our attention. And so we started doing research on, what does that mean? And what we found out was that 40% of all communication is visual, 80% of that is color and shape. And that's where Blink Factor was born. It was born based on the fact of creating these shortcuts in brand selection, giving consumers cues that they can notice miles away on the brand preference and making it easier for them to select that brand. If you think of McDonald's, my daughter, who was 2 years old, she knew what McDonald's was. She recognized the arches as a place for getting chips or fries, and also being able to play in the jungle gym environment. And so that's the power. When you do it effectively, you're creating a shortcut in the consumer's memory, an emotional shortcut that connects the brand with the consumer. And when they're making that buying decision, you're making it easier for them to make that decision. Because when you start looking at the brain and how the brain operates, asking the brain to do complex things like reading, making tough decisions, you use a lot of calories. And the brain doesn't want to do that. They're looking for shortcuts in making those decisions. And that's where emotional connection plays an important role, because it drives that decision in the split second.
That would explain why in the logo for pizza they have their roof on there. The red roof is in the logo.
Exactly. It wasn't there at the beginning.
Yeah.
It became part of the element. Golden arches for McDonald's. But when you think of emotional connections, all you have to do is point at the last elections in the US. So I'm not taking sides, Sure. We're Canadians. We have our own challenges with our politicians. But we had predicted that Trump was going to win, not because of who Trump was, but the message he was saying. When you looked at Harris, and we did a whole analysis of what are the themes that Harris was communicating versus Trump. Harris was all about protection, security, very basic things on the Maslow hierarchy of needs. Whereas Trump was talking about aspiration, making America great again, talking about growth and success and elevating. And so you can see how that message connected emotionally. And so you could do all kinds of silly things on stage, say silly things on stage. But but people forgave him for that because the message he was delivering resonated with them on a very deep emotional side. And so when we look at politics, or if we look at, making a decision on your partner for life, you're going to make those decisions emotionally, and you're going to talk yourself out of the rational factors. And that's where con artists do so well in convincing consumers to make decisions that they normally wouldn't do. They allow the consumer to connect with them on an emotional level so that their security guard on the rational side goes away.
This is interesting. I think you just solved a riddle I've always wondered about through my life. So one of the problems I've had is I'll meet people, and there's certain people that will have they'll have tried to put up a high wall of resistance to salespeople. Like they'll have a thing on their door, like it's kind of an old joke from the door knocking, door-to-door salesman days, where the person who has I don't accept cold calls or knocks on my door, door-to-door salesman, don't knock on my door. Anybody who knows sales knows that that's the door you knock on, regardless of the warning, because they're the ones who will buy, who can buy, and will buy, and it's kind of like a signal. One of the problems I used to have in my mortgage business for 2 decades was we would have people come in, and they would usually have, this was usually a case of someone who had bad credit, because most people that had good credit, you just rubber stamp their loans and whatever. But if they had bad credit, you had to, search for a lender. You had to try and, massage their credit and present it, PR spin it to the lender and be like, they missed a couple payments, but they had something extraneous happen, and yada, yada, yada. And, some people had some really bad credit, and we go to work to try and find a loan buyer for them. And we run a good company. We never tried to rip anybody off. We tried to, we did hundreds of loans a month. We weren't interested in losing our license. And there were certain loans we wouldn't do. And so we become an offer. And so I'll just throw an example out there. I think during most of our time, the interest rates were about 6%, something like that. And we make an offer like 9%. something like that. They'd be paying an extra premium because they were high risk. And, we'd present them, and usually the fees would be a little bit higher because whoever the bank was we were selling the paper to, they would be like, this is high risk. We need a little bit more money for this. Very common in the credit industry. And so we would present that to them, and they would flip the fuck out. They would be like, you're ripping me off. You guys are a scam organization. And we might have $5,000, I think, in closing costs. Now, that's not all money to us. That includes titling and title fees and mortgage and appraisal and all that shit that gets done, and the interest per diem and all that stuff. But it would be about $5,000 in closing costs, and with the bad credit, and so they would flip out. Oh, you promised us 6%, 7%. We actually got sued one time in small claims court by some crazy lady who was like, you promised you in the application when I took it, it was a contract. You promised me good credit rates, and we're like, you have bad credit, so you didn't get good credit rates. And they're like, I'll enforce this contract. She lost, evidently. But so they would do that, and then they would come back to us maybe a year or two later. They come to us to refinance, or sometimes they just, I don't know, the loan officer would have followed up with them, and they'd given them the data, and they would always, these are people like, I will not get ripped off. I always get ripped off, and I will not get ripped off. There was those people, right? And later we'd find out that they'd paid, instead of 9%, $5,000 in closing costs, $10,000 to $15,000 in closing costs, and 11, 14%. I mean, they got railroaded. Yeah. And I would call them up, and I'd be like, I don't really understand what's going on. Like, how we offered you an incredible deal. Have you read the paperwork that you signed? Oh no, I really trust these people. These people were really trustable, unlike your company, and I really believed in them. And I'd be stumped. I mean, for 20 years. So I think you've solved a riddle for me of why people do what they do, and it's that emotional content. Somehow those people with the silverest tongues and the biggest scam artists were able to get into them emotionally and make that conversion.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but that's the reality. And today with, technology, sentiment analysis, I mean, the banks use it now. So most of the large institutions, if you call on their service line, they call it the assisted channel, the odds are that AI is doing sentiment analysis to understand, are you an upset customer? Are you anxious? Are you fearful? And that helps the other person, the representative on the other line, to really understand where the customer is coming from an emotional standpoint. And that's very helpful, so that you can kind of put their mind at ease, or, deflate a situation, and be able to plan that before you even have the call, like within minutes of a conversation, to be able to diffuse the issue because you've understood where they're coming from an emotional standpoint. And you're going to see more and more of that.
The other thing that I've dealt with in life that this probably really solves, and maybe I kind of knew that, but I've had girlfriends that have dated me, and I like to think I'm a good, masculine, healthy male who has good relationships, and I do have good relationships. But sometimes I've seen my exes, they get with guys who went to jail for rape and were criminals, or they were stalkers, or violent, or abusive. I've seen people that I've dated where I'm like, hey, you treat them well, you take them on wonderful dates, and they get with, some bad Chad who beats them and is abusive and just a horrible person. And you're like, what the fuck? Like, for me, a logical and reasoned male, I can look at two different things and compare them and go, clearly one is safer than the other for someone's thing. But clearly, whatever emotional manipulation that other person can do, or another company can do, can get into people. And it's funny how passive they are about, and comfortable they are about, being railroaded. Like I would talk to these people, and you would show them on paper with the mortgage side by side. Here's our closing costs. Here's the closing costs you end up paying. Here's the interest rate you end up paying. And they just be like, meh. And you're just like, serious? Yeah. I mean, if I paid 4 or 5% above, we saw people that got railroaded, just just turned out by some other mortgage company that specialized in railroading people. And they would just be happy with it. They probably went back to them for refinance. I was just, and so I think you've solved the riddle for me, that it really is that emotional connection to people.
Yeah, and it's understanding where that consumer is coming from. So if your ex-girlfriends, they probably lacked a lot of self-confidence. They had a low self-image, and and that makes them vulnerable. And but when you think of the blink factor and you think of making those emotional connections, the positive side of that is that it's helping the consumer make buying decision or make big decisions in their lives, right? But also, if marketers understand what drive those emotions, you take a car purchase, it's the second largest purchase next to a home. And people say, it's about the features. You ask a friend who's bought a BMW, why did you buy it? The resale value is amazing. The performance is amazing. But when you peel it down, we call that hidden need states. When you start peeling down in the conversation why they really purchased that vehicle, it's all emotion. It made me look smarter than my neighbor. It reaffirmed my success in the community. These are all emotional things. And what it also tells you is that you can drive a premium for brands if you have the right blink factor, the right emotional connection, because they're not going to rationalize the purchase. They'll do that after the fact, but it's going to be emotionally based, that purchase decision. And so that's a powerful insight that most marketers constantly overlook. They focus on the next feature. And the challenge in the marketplace, Chris, is that the competitive advantage of companies now are minuscule. If you come up with a great product, your competition is going to match it within 6 months, if not 3 or maybe a couple of weeks, depending on the complexity of that. So trying to compete with the marketplace based on functional needs and attributes, it's not sustainable. And that's where the blink factor and the emotional connection plays an important role. And something that you talked about about your girlfriends, the other factor, there's a growing level of mental illness in North America, and it's driven by being lonely. And you'd think social media would have made us more accessible, more connected. That's not the reality. The reality is there's a significant problem in society today where young consumers feel lonely, isolated, and understanding those emotional needs and helping solve those emotional needs is a real opportunity for large companies.
Yeah. You see that in the Target and the Amazon purchases. I mean, I have friends that their wives go 2 times a day to Target every day. Mm-hmm. And you're like, what the fuck is going on? There was a point where when I became successful and had money from growing up poor, to where I was out buying stuff. And at first it was just to fill the home. I bought a home, did the big 4,000 square foot home, 3-car garage, all that. And so at first I was buying shit to fill the home, you need curtains, you need a bed, you need all that stuff, right? You need whatever. And so I was on that tour, and then I started noticing that there was something going on with me emotionally. I had to go every weekend to buy stuff. I would just go to the mall and search for shit to buy. And I'm like, in the back of my head, I was going like, this is really fucking stupid what I'm doing. Like, why you're just going and looking for stuff to buy to see if there's something you need to buy when you don't really need things. Like one of the great skits of George Carlin is his buying more shit, and then you got to buy shit to store your shit in to buy more shit.
Yeah.
It's a great bit that he did if you go back and pull it. And I realized that I was having some sort of emotional crisis of insecurity, and there was some few things going on with me emotionally, and I was buying stuff to try and fill that void. And I had to shut it down. I was like, this is not healthy because I'm just buying stupid shit.
Yeah, just because when you buy, you stimulate the dopamines. And that gives you a positive high when you do purchases.
That explains why people go to Starbucks instead of making their own coffee at home.
Oh, it's an experience. And that's the other thing, is that when you think of emotional connections, a lot of it is driven by memory capture. You don't remember the features and benefits of that coffee maker you have in the house, but you do remember how that coffee maker made you feel in the morning when you had that cup of coffee. People remember how brands made them feel, how products made them feel, how people made them feel. They forget about all the features and benefits. That's kind of lost in the noise. And so creating these, we call them brand stories, telling that story emotionally to the consumer and creating that experience around that story is how you really truly connect with the consumer. And I think Apple has done a fantastic job of that. Forget about the physical product. There's a whole unwrapping experience that happens when you buy an Apple product. I mean, the way the packaging was designed, the unboxing experience, it all ties to the product and the sophistication of the product. And it's all part of that experience. And they control that. Mm-hmm. Take another brand, Harley Davidson. They've trademarked the sound of their muffler.
Oh, really?
Because it's part of the experience. Yeah, they've trademarked the sound of their mufflers. They don't want any other motorcycle company imitating their sound because it's part of that experience. You can hear that motorcycle a mile away. And it's a Harley, it's not a Suzuki or a Kawasaki. You clearly understand what that brand
You'll probably feel that sound as they go by.
Yeah.
It tends to get inside you. I'm just like, holy crap, man. What the hell? But talk to us about some of the services that you offer on your website with SLD and some of the things that you work with. Do you only work with companies of a certain size and income or revenue base? Tell us about, if someone's listening out there on LinkedIn or some of the different platforms that we have, tell us who the customer is for you that would be interested in working with you.
Yeah, Chris, our core primary client is what we call transformation aspirers. These are organizations that are going through a major change. They've lost their relevancy in the marketplace. It could be a major drugstore chain or a major fast food chain. I'll use Dairy Queen, for example. Dairy Queen came to us. We developed their new identity, their new restaurant experience. This goes back, I think, 12 years ago. And we launched DQ Grill and Chill because we realized that they were selling hot food since the start of their company. But when you ask consumers, when you think of going to a hot food restaurant or fast food chain, where does Dairy Queen fit? And it was way at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't in what we call the consideration set. And so we took a look at how are we going to deliver hot food? The first thing we found out was, what are the barriers for consumers going to Dairy Queen buying hot food? The number one barrier is consumers don't want that staff to be touching the ice cream and touching the burgers. They want those areas separated, hence DQ Grill and Chill. And we created that experience where we leveraged nostalgia, the history of the brand and where it stood in the communities. And then we separated the grill and the chill. Those units tripled in sales and continues to drive growth for Dairy Queen because we captured the emotional needs of the consumer. We overcome those emotional barriers that they had. And it's turned to be a very successful program for them. And so what we do is we do major transformations. So we'll look at, are they positioned properly in the marketplace? Who are their core target group? We'll because again, competitive advantage now, it's slim. When you look at the difference in customer satisfaction between the top brand and the fifth brand, it's marginal. But how those brands make their customers feel isn't. And so we get involved in understanding what are the emotional triggers. And then we look at that customer journey across all those purchase moments to develop the ideal experience through the identity, the physical experience, retailers, for example, their signage, their e-commerce platform, their training for their staff. That's what we do. We look at holistically.
Mm-hmm. And give your advice. So do the companies need to be a certain size, or we work with small, medium to large?
We work with small, medium, and large. I mean, the reality for us, it's not so much the size of the company, but the integration of the services that they're looking for. We're looking for clients, startups to large global organizations that are looking for an integrated, holistic approach versus just being tactical or incremental. And there's a big disease happening now in the global economy, And that's this incremental mindset. We want to minimize risk. So we're just going to add another flavor to our lineup, or we're just going to decorate the store. We're not going to revamp our business model. And that incrementalism is killing business. It doesn't work anymore. Consumers are expecting a lot more from brands.
Definitely. It's kind of interesting how it really has developed. But you give me some ideas on I'm going to read your book and you give me some ideas on why these things. Because, I mean, for a lot of years, I've been wandering around with this stuff. And I kind of knew it was emotional, but what kind of manipulator do you have? And what's funny about these people that they have these high resistance and walls. You always hear it. It's the person who goes, I always get ripped off, so I don't trust anybody. And then they always still get ripped off. And it's because the silver tongue, sweet talkers that, they have a way of getting emotionally into people's heads. They are the ones who can get over that wall. And so, like, the good people can't get over the wall. The people who have integrity and good business sense can't get over the wall because they've erected this wall. And they're like, oh, you must be. But somehow those silver tongue scammers and people that whatever, they make that emotional connection like you talk about. And there it lies.
And it's a double-edged sword. On the positive side, if you're a trustworthy brand, and trust is at the bottom of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, it's the foundation. You're either trusted or not. And if you're not going to be purchased by the consumer. But it's about moving up that to a sense of belonging, which is the middle of and giving that consumer a sense of belonging, that they belong to the tribe that buys this brand. And that's really important because that's the doorway. I wrote a book called The Belonging Experience about 15 years ago. And it was about, hey, if you want to aspire, you need to have a sense of belonging. You need to feel like you're part of a tribe. Because we, as human beings, we're social animals. We don't live alone. We live within groups and we tell stories. And that's how we aspire. And so successful brands, brands that have created strong trust with their customers have allowed them to participate as part of the brand, the sense of belonging, to allow them to aspire. And so the messaging these brands are communicating, think of Nike, just do it. It's aspirational. It's about achievement. It's not about the functional benefits of the running shoe. It's about allowing you to achieve your best.
Yeah.
And that's why these brands are like Apple, think different. You have Lego, Patagonia, Amazon. These are all brands that connect emotionally with consumers because they allow the consumer to aspire to a better place. Another great brand is Costco. Costco is the only retailer in the world that if they're out of stock, you blame yourself. You go to any other retailer, and if you want to buy that box of cereal and it's not on the shelf, you're going to be really upset. Mm-hmm. But at Costco, you're going to blame yourself because Costco has sold the experience of discovery. You go there thinking you're going to buy 3 or 4 products. You walk out having spent $1,000 because they create this experience where you're constantly discovering new things.
Yeah, it's buying things in bulk.
Yeah.
So this has been very insightful. Give people a pitch out as we go out on how to reach out to you, how to inquire about working with you, where to order your book, all that good stuff, and the documents.
Yeah, so just come to www.sldsamlovedog.com. And we have, in the insight section of our website, we have books you can download, ebooks. There's studies and white papers. We also have a LinkedIn blog called Think Blink. Please take a look at it. And that's the easiest place you'll find all of our contact information there.
Thank you very much, JP, for coming to the show. We really appreciate it. You've really opened my eyes to some things I need to refocus on when it comes to emotional connection. What's that old line? They won't remember what you do, they'll remember how you made them feel. Or
absolutely.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Order up the book wherever fine books are sold, folks. Desire by Design. What data-driven marketers should know about driving desire for their brands. Out April 17th, 2018. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. And that